On am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are, ma'am.
Okay. So at the outset, I would like to thank Walter Kluwer for organizing this Medical Edge series and giving me an opportunity to address everyone on this topic, a simple topic, but a very important topic for undergraduate students, the anatomy of the liver. I welcome all the participants who have joined today to attend this lecture on anatomy of the liver. Thank you, Mr. Ravi Shukla and your team from Walter Kluwer for giving me this honor. So today's topic, which I'm going to say, is anatomy of the liver. And today, it so happens that today is the 13th of August, and it's also the World Organs Day. The World Organ Day in which let's all pledge for organ donation and spread awareness amongst us. One organ donor, one person can save 8 lives. So liver is an organ which can be donated very easily. So before actually I'm going to start on this lecture, I would be telling you a short story. So this is about the Greek god Prometheus. He was known to have stolen fire for mankind from the kingdom of Zeus. And as a result, because of this, he was punished by the king. And what they did is, as you can see 2 pictures out here, and you see that there are 2 sculptures actually. So in which, I'm just showing this picture. This is Prometheus, and he was tied onto a cliff with shackles. In the daytime, evening, they would tie him up. And what would happen? An eagle will come and eat his liver. And the next day, when he would be released, they will find that the liver has regenerated. So this gave an idea that what is happening, how can the liver regenerate? So liver is an organ which has a capacity to regenerate, and this has been useful for liver transplantation. Tissue cultures which happen in the lab, liver is one which can regenerate, and a full liver is not required. A partial liver transplantation also can save somebody's life, and it so happens to be today World Organs Day. So I thought it would be good to give all our students an awareness about organ donation, which is an integral part of any anatomy teaching, body donation and organ donation. Liver, as we all know, is essential for life. That means if there is no liver, a person cannot survive, as it has number of metabolic activities. The hepatocytes are the functional unit cells of the liver, which secrete bile. Number of metabolic activities which take place is the metabolism of glucose, lipids, breaking down of amino acids. Liver is responsible for storing vitamins, irons, and micronutrients. It removes all the toxic substances from the body and converts it into urea, and it's also responsible. The macrophages out here are the Kupffer cells, which are helping in phagocytosis. During fetal life, it is responsible for hemopoiesis. So I would just start, which we call the induction today, by giving you a small case presentation. So this is according to the new guidelines of NMC, that we give a case, and at the end of this, you are the ones who are going to tell me what the answer of this is. So a 20-year-old male presented with history of fever, chills, rigors, and pain in the right hypochondrium for 10 days. On examination, the liver was tender, palpable, 5 centimeters below the costal margin. Ultrasound showed large fluid filled collections in the right lobe of the liver, and it was diagnosed as a liver abscess. He was given antibiotic, but the next day he developed a severe cough and breathlessness. A chest X-ray revealed he's got pleural effusion. That means fluid in the chest cavity, in the pleural cavity. So now, with your knowledge of anatomy, what could be the cause of this condition? What are the surfaces which are affected in the liver? That's what we are going to find out. So today's lecture would cover all this. We will try to study where the liver is located, its extent and location, the external features, talking about the lobes, surfaces and borders, the peritoneal folds related to it, relations of the liver, segments, blood supply, lymphatic drainage, nerve supply, a little bit about the microscopic anatomy and the development of the liver with applied aspect. So the liver is the largest organ of the body. It weighs about 1600 grams in males, approximate weight. It would be, and in females around 1300 grams. It has about 2% of body mass in adults. In newborns, it's 5% in the newborns. And during fetal life, it's 2%, 10% of the body mass is the liver. So you can see out here in this picture, its extent lying in the upper part of the abdomen, occupying the entire right hypochondrium, occupying the epigastrium, and also going into the left hypochondrium. So the liver is occupying the entire abdomen, stretching from the right hypochondrium, the epigastrium, going 1 hand's breadth below the giphisternal joint and extending, tapering into the left hypochondrium. So the general features, it's a wedge-shaped structure. Once the rib cage is opened up, it's a wedge-shaped structure, reddish brown in color, covered by peritoneum, excepting the bare areas, which we call as, which comes indirectly in contact with the diaphragm. You can see that below the liver, there is the fold of greater omentum, and you can see the stomach peeping out on the left side and the gallbladder here, just at the inferior border. Liver is palpable along the costal margin. It's covered by a capsule, which is called the Glisson's capsule. So we look at the extent of the liver. At the lateral sternal line, this is sternum, at the lateral sternal line, the liver is going up to the 5th rib, the lungs goes up to the 6th rib, and the pleura goes up to the 7th rib. While posteriorly at the vertebral spine, it's at the 8th rib, 8th spine, the 10th spine, and the pleura is up to the 12th spine. That's the extent. While in the mid-lateral mid-axillary line, the liver is up to the 6th rib, lung is 8th rib, and we have the pleura at the 10th rib. So it is occupying the entire right hypochondrium, hand's breadth below the giphisternal angle, where it cannot be palpated because of the rectus abdominis muscle. So the palpation is only at the costal margin, where it comes against the costal cartilages, the 9th, 10th, 9th, 8th, and 7th costal cartilages. It can be palpated around this part. And if we draw the surface marking, it is one at the mid-axillary line at the 10th space, another point just below the 5th intercostal space on the left side in the 5th intercostal space, and another just below the nipple in the mid-clavicular line near the 5th rib. We join these 3 points. The superior border forms a concavity, and that's the superior border. The lower line and the the upper right and the lower right are joined by a convex T towards the right. This gives the surface projection of the liver. So one should know how to draw the liver when you're asked to draw it in the class. The liver, as I said, moves with respiration. It moves with respiration. So because it is snugly fitted along the diaphragm, so one would see that when there is inspiration, it comes down. While there is expiration, it goes above. It can go almost, when we look at this picture on this, we see that the other right costal margin, it is going to 4 to 8 centimeters above in the midline. And in the mid-clavicular line, it goes almost 6 to 12 centimeters above. So one can palpate the liver in inspiration, tell the person to have a deep breath, keep one hand behind the right flank, and then palpate the costal margin to feel this inferior border. But when one wants to approach the liver, one should ask the patient to take a deep breath and hold it in expiration. Thereby, the lungs and the pleura are not going to come against the liver surfaces. In fact, it will be just the anterior abdominal wall and the diaphragm, and then one has the liver. So this is an ideal site for liver biopsies, but of course nowadays they are all under the ultrasound guided to avoid injuries. So once the rib cage has been opened up, and you see this is the in situ relationship of the liver, which we usually see in the dissection hall. So before one starts the dissection of abdomen, once one finishes with the anterior abdominal wall dissection and has done the peritoneal reflections, remove the anterior abdominal wall to show what it looks like when it is inside the body, that we call as the in situ relationship. So the river, the right part of the river is actually fitted against the right dome of the diaphragm, and the left part of the liver is fitted against the left dome of the diaphragm. And what do we say, right and left? If you can see very clearly out here, there is a ligament which is called the falciform ligament, which is connecting the liver from the anterior abdominal wall and from the diaphragm, and cuts across the anterior surface of the liver that we see here into two parts, a right liver and a left liver. So the right side lobe and the left side lobe, or we call them the anatomical right lobe and the anatomical left lobe. In the free margin of this falciform ligament, one sees that there is a structure which is the ligamentum teres. And this is nothing but the obliterated left umbilical vein, or it's called the round ligament or the ligamentum teres. Just below the liver, what one sees is the greater omentum, in which lies the transverse colon. One can see a part of the stomach out here near the left side, and inferior border one sees the gallbladder. So once you can imagine now the extent that the liver occupies in the abdominal cavity. So liver is covered by peritoneum except at the bare area. Bare area means an area which is not having any peritoneum in it. We'll come to it later. So the liver has surfaces. The one which we see from front, which I showed you, is the anterior surface. It has a superior and a right lateral surface. The superior and right lateral surface are actually the diaphragmatic surface. The anterior surface is coming against the anterior abdominal wall. The posterior surface also has partly comes with it has some amount of diaphragm coming with it, And you find that the inferior surface, the posterior inferior surface is the one which has the viscera coming adjacent to it. So the molding of the liver is such that the anterior, superior and right lateral surface are all can be combined together and called the diaphragmatic surface, as they form a convexity which snugly fits against the dome of the diaphragm. The inferior border is well defined, while the other borders are not that distinct. So this is what I'm trying to show you. This is the anterior part of the liver that we are seeing. This is the sharp inferior margin of the liver, and just near the midline, just away from, there is you can see a depression which is called the fissure for the ligamentum teres, which is there, and onto it liver surface you can see this ligament which is going is called the falciform ligament, dividing the liver into a right and a left lobe, right? And on the lateral side, 4 centimeters away, we have this out here, which is the inferior border. One can see the gallbladder, which is actually related to the inferior surface of the liver. So we have right lobe, we have left lobe. On the inferior surface of the liver, if you look out here, this is a upside down picture where this is actually the left lobe and this is the right lobe. You can see that this has the right lobe, the left lobe. This is the part where there are 2 more lobes in the inferior surface in the right lobe, which are called the quadrate lobe, and one superiorly, which is called the caudate lobe. So now let's look at this structure very clearly. You can see that there is a hilum, which is called the porta hepatis. At the inferior border, you have the fossa for the gallbladder, in which the gallbladder lies. Left to this fossa is a quadrangular lobe, which is called the quadrate lobe. And right to that, left to that, there is a fissure, which is the fissure for the ligamentum teres. This ligamentum teres, what is it? It is nothing but the obliterated left umbilical vein. In fetal life, this was patent, and circulation from the placenta used to come from the left umbilical vein and drain into the left portal vein. And this left portal vein would join the inferior vena cava by another channel, which is called the ductus venosus. So this is the placental circulation, as how the blood would go into the liver and form a shortcut to go to the IVC and thereby drain into the heart. So in front of the porta hepatis, the posterior aspect one sees this lobe out here is caudate lobe, and the lobe in front is the quadrate lobe. So there are 4 lobes out here, the quadrate, the caudate, the right lobe and the left lobe. And here this on the posterior surface, this vein that we see is the inferior vena cava. I'll be coming into this in detail as we go and I talk about the relations. So the entire right lobe is formed by this bigger part of the liver, by the quadrate and the caudate lobe, while the left lobe is the small tapering end which is present in the epigastrium and left hypochondrium. So now let's come to the relationships of the liver. As I told you, we now just see each and every surface of the liver. Now look at this lower picture. First, concentrate on this lower picture. This is what we see when we are looking at the liver from front. When we are looking at the liver from the front, you see that it is triangular in shape. It's triangular in shape, and you can see that the ligamentum, this is the falciform ligament, is coming to the anterior surface of the liver. And as I told you in the previous picture, this falciform ligament is actually starting from the anterior abdominal wall and it is continuous with the anterior abdominal wall, carrying the left umbilical vein in its free margin, And as it is coming onto the anterior surface, it divides into two. One part goes to the right side, covers the anterior and the superior part of the right lobe, while the other part goes on to the anterior and superior part of the left lobe. The portion of the Now, this picture that we see is the superior surface, as if we are seeing the liver remove the diaphragm and seeing it from the top. If you are seeing it from the sitting in the thoracic cavity and looking down. So the liver has been removed, and you see that this is the right layer of the falciform ligament. As it is going, it forms a ligament out here, which is called the superior layer of the coronary ligament. It's called the superior layer of the coronary ligament, and it gets reflected onto the undersurface of the diaphragm. And here we have one more ligament, which is called the anterior layer of the coronary ligament, which goes to the left side. And from the diaphragm that it comes is the posterior layer of the coronary ligament. These two would fuse and form a triangular ligament, which is called the left triangular ligament. Similarly, so on the left, we have a left triangular ligament, which is formed by the anterior and posterior coronary ligaments on the left side. While on the right side, what happens? We have a superior layer, which is called the superior layer of the coronary ligament. And we will also have an inferior layer of the coronary ligament. But as a result, what happens, that I'll show you in the next picture, there is a huge area out here which is becoming non-peritoneal. So now let's see it in the subsequent picture. You will see, as I said, this is the superior layer of the coronary ligament. This is the posterior surface of the limb. Let's first orient ourselves to this part. This is the posterior surface of the, as we see it from behind. And you can appreciate the wedge. When we looked at it from the front and from the superior surface, it was nice and convex. But here they have got some contours because of the viscera which are coming against it. So here we have the superior layer of the coronary ligament out here. And we find the inferior vena cava actually lodged on the posterior surface. Sometimes liver tissue covers it to form a tunnel, but usually it is just forming a groove in which the IVC lies. And the portion of the omentum which comes of the peritoneum, which comes from the diaphragm, would be reflecting on and forming the inferior layer of the coronary ligament. So we have the inferior layer of the coronary, we have the superior layer of the coronary ligament, and both of them would unite to form a triangular ligament. So we have a triangular ligament, and as a result, we have an area which has got no peritoneum in the posterior surface of the liver, which is called the bare area of the liver, which is bounded by the superior layer of coronary, inferior layer of coronary, and the base is formed by the IVC. Now let's look at this. If we see between this lobe, I had already told you it's the caudate lobe, and this is the quadrate lobe. This fissure out here is for the ligamentum teres. This is the porta hepatis, that's the hilum. And this fissure out here, we call it the fissure for the ligamentum venosum. So we have the two lobes, which are again covered by peritoneum. As they reflect, it comes and covers the porta hepatis, but the fissures which are present, the fissure for the ligamentum teres, fissure for the ligamentum venosum, this part of the porta hepatis and the IVC and the fossa for the gallbladder have no peritoneum in them. They are called the bare area of the liver. This part of the bare area that we see here, this area of the bare area that we see here comes directly in contact with the diaphragm, having some areolar tissues in it and some lymphatics, a good site for collection of any pus. Usually amoebic liver abscesses come and form here. So this is the inferior surface. Now you can see very clearly the inferior surface, and you can see the coronary ligaments. Actually, they would be the anterior and the posterior layer. They would be forming the left triangular ligament, which will be on the left side, the right triangular ligament on the right side. And this we can see how the hilum is present and how the peritoneum is getting reflected. And this area is called the porta hepatis. As we go further, I'll be showing you better pictures to explain all this. So this is the liver from the posterior side. The posterior side, if you see the liver, so what do we see out here? We see that this is the IVC, and the blue markings out here are actually giving us the peritoneal reflections. So you can very well see the triangular area, which is out here showing in it's been shown in a schematic diagram, which shows you on the posterior side that between the superior and inferior layer of the coronary ligament on the right posterior side of the liver, there is an area which has no peritoneum. It's called the bare area, and this is the IVC, which is forming the base of this bare area. And from the porta hepatis, from this ligamentum venosum and the porta hepatis, a fold of peritoneum comes down to the stomach, which forms the lesser omentum. So out here, what we see is the lesser omentum, which is coming. Lesser omentum is, many of you wouldn't have done abdomen, so it might be a bit difficult to understand these terminologies, what is omentum and what are mesentery. But the peritoneal coverings in the abdomen, as in thorax, it was called pleura. Here this is called omentum. And as they are coming from the lesser curvature to from the porta hepatis, so they come from the porta hepatis and from the ligamentum venosum, it's an L-shaped structure. It would be coming down onto the lesser curvature of the stomach and the first part of the duodenum. So it's called the hepatogastric fold of the lesser omentum and the hepatoduodenal fold of the lesser omentum. So now we'll just do the relations of the liver. As we do, look at the superior surface. The center portion of the superior surface is deeply concave, which comes in relation to the central tendon of the diaphragm, and superior to that lies the pericardium of the heart. So this is the cardiac impression separating it from the diaphragm, the central tendon of the diaphragm. On the right side, it's the diaphragm, on the left side also. So the superior surface is related to the diaphragm. We've already talked about the the peritoneal reflections out here. And if we look at this, the crust of the diaphragm, and as we go down with the diaphragm, it will be separating it from the pleural cavity and from the base of the lungs. Similarly, on the left side, it's the diaphragm is separating it from the left pleura, that's the pleural recess, the pleura, and the left base of the lungs. So the left base of the lung, the right base of the lung, and the heart are occupying the superior surface. And the lateral surface, if we see, the anterior and the lateral surface is where we have the costal margins on the inferior border. But here we have the diaphragm separating it from the pleura and the lungs. If we go to the middle third, we have the diaphragm separating it from the pleura. And if we go lower down, it will be just the diaphragm. So this is an area in the mid-axillary line where in deep inspiration, the lungs doesn't come, can go above. So an area can be achieved. One can find the area where there is no intervening pleura or pericardium. Now let's come to the inferior surface of the liver is called the visceral surface. Is called the visceral surface because number of viscera are formed. are positioned in this area. Now, if we look at this, the first part that we have the impression near the caudate lobe is the esophageal. Near this is the esophageal relation, and this would be continuing with the gastric impression. So the liver on the left side is related to the stomach, and the esophagus, the fundus, and we have the stomach related to the left lobe. On the right side, it's the renal and the suprarenal. So the peritoneum, which is coming from the posterior layer, is actually coming in front of the renal and the suprarenal area. And near this portion, inferior part of the right, we have the colic impression, and near the quadrate lobe, one has the duodenal impression. The loops of the duodenum will be coming and covering this part. The caudate lobe is related to the omentum. So the inferior surface is the one which is related to the viscera. So this portion also we have the gastric impression and the esophageal impression, which would be posterior inferiorly. The visceras are coming and getting related to this. And this is the fossa for the gallbladder. So this is the hilum. As I said, from the hilum, the lesser omentum comes out, and the lesser omentum is passing from the fissure for the ligamentum venosum and also passing to the porta hepatis. It's L-shaped, and as it comes down, it will be coming onto the lesser curvature of the stomach and the first part of the duodenum. So if we remove the omentum, these are the structures that would one see in this free margin, and this is called the free margin of the lesser omentum. So what are the structures which are lying here? It's the hepatic artery, the portal vein, and the bile duct. These are the three structures which are lying in the free margin of the lesser omentum. So liver, as we see, is lying in the right hypochondrium, epigastrium, and we said also in part in the left hypochondrium. The liver, as you see, doesn't have any thick ligaments to support it. The ligaments which are there are all the peritoneal folds. So the liver is actually the hepatic vein opening into the IVC form a major anchor of the liver substance for the parenchyma of the liver. Liver itself is a very vascular structure. It's pliable. So, and that is the reason why it's covered by a capsule which is called the Glisson's capsule. The anterior abdominal muscles and the diaphragm, their tone supports the liver from anterior and superior side. These are the ligaments, which are not very, we would say, strong ligaments because they are folds of peritoneum. But the right and the left triangular ligament are the ligaments which need to be cut if we want to mobilize the liver. For mobilization of the liver, right and the left triangular ligament have to be removed. And the lesser omentum, which is carrying the structures from the porta hepatis, is also forming a support anteriorly. So the right triangular ligament, the left triangular ligament, the lesser omentum. From the anterior abdominal wall, we have this falciform ligament, which is coming from the posterior surface of the anterior abdominal wall and coming onto the anterior surface of the liver. So these are the ligaments which are supporting the liver. Once we remove the liver, the structures which are left behind are called the liver bed. Similarly, you had one lecture on the stomach. So in that you have all studied that when structures have been removed, the stomach had been removed, you saw the stomach bed. Now we have removed the structures from the liver and you can see the liver bed, and one sees that these are the dome of the diaphragm is present out here. This is a schematic diagram, and this is actually in a cadaver that one sees. And what do you see? You see that there is the the right kidney, and with the kidney above there is the suprarenal. So the right kidney, the right suprarenal, part of the colon, the IVC, they are all forming, and the diaphragm are all forming the liver bed, and part of this esophagus and the stomach, this is a cut section of the stomach, are forming the part which is going to form the liver bed. So this is the liver bed. You can see the hepatic flexure. So this is the hepatic flexure, the kidney out here, and the suprarenal. So they are the parts which are forming the liver bed. So these are the posterior relations of the liver. So as we have already studied about the relationship of the liver, how intimately it is related to the diaphragm, but one would see that the liver, as it is just below the diaphragm, is the subphrenic space. Just below the liver is the subhepatic space. These are potential spaces. They are not true spaces. They are potential spaces. But if there is any infection or infiltration into these spaces, fluid would be able to come in. So in infection, fluid traverses in those cavities into these spaces. So this is the superior border of the liver. And between the superior border of the liver and the diaphragm, we have the space which is called the subphrenic space, divided by the falciform ligament into a right space and a left space. Below this liver, these are the subhepatic spaces, and due to gravity in erect posture, it will go down to the pelvic cavity, while when the patient is supine, it will come into a cavity which is called the hepatorenal pouch, because the right liver is intimately related to the right kidney and the suprarenal. So the fluid, there's a potential space out here in which fluid comes and accumulates in this space. So it can come to the pelvic space, and it also comes into the right hepatorenal pouch. So this is the space. So it's the subhepatic space. So these spaces are intercommunicating. You can see this is the subphrenic space coming in relation to the subhepatic space. So this is a normal that we see. And this space that we see out here between the liver and the kidney, this is called the hepatorenal pouch, because it's a potential site where fluid can accumulate into this in a supine position. And if you look at this picture, you see that in the subphrenic space on the right side, there is an abscess, and this abscess can have, anyway, there are some pseudomembranes in this picture, therefore there is no, but if it is not present, the fluid or the pus can go inside, and it can lead to severe conditions which need immediate attention. The question that I had given you was that the patient had an abscess in the posterior side of the liver, and this was the liver. So in fact, this is the part that it had the infection or the abscess, and it has pierced the diaphragm and gone into the pleural space. Therefore, the patient experienced coughing and there was pleural effusion. So it's not that if we just say that this is diaphragm is separating the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, but yes, in certain conditions, because the diaphragm at the posterior side, there is no peritoneum, it's a bare area, it's a likely site for accumulation of infections and going into the thoracic cavity. And these infections can also come into the abdominal cavity and form pockets of collection of pus. Now the liver, what we did till now has been the anatomical classification of the liver into right lobe and left lobe. So the right lobe comprises of the entire right lobe with the caudate and the quadrate lobe, the caudate and the quadrate lobe. and this is the left side. So this is the undersurface of the liver from the showing you the right and the left lobe. If we look at it as the functional classification of the liver, if we take an imaginary line from the fundus of the gallbladder to the margin, right margin of the IVC, we now divide the liver into two hemilivers, a right liver and a left liver. So we have a line which is cutting across the liver into two parts, which is the right and the left. As a result, what is happening? The right caudate and quadrate lobe are going into the left liver, making it almost equal. So anatomically, we said that it has four lobes, but functionally or by surgical divisions, we say it has two lobes. So now let's understand the basic concept of segments of the liver, or what do we say about the surgical segmentations. So I said that the IVC is the vein which actually is intersegmental. So this is a schematic diagram to show you how the liver is divided into three. So from the fissure for the IVC, from the IVC to the fossa of the gallbladder, if we draw an imaginary line, we find a main fissure, or it's also called the portal fissure, which is dividing the liver into a right half and a left half. And if you see carefully, you would say that they are all numbered. I'll come to this numbering later on. And into these, the IVC has three veins draining into it: a right hepatic vein, a middle hepatic vein, and a left hepatic vein. All these veins, as they are draining into it, they are forming the liver into further segments. That means the right liver has been divided into a anteromedial segment and a posterolateral segment, and the left liver has been, or the left lobe of the liver has been divided into a anteromedial, or we say a medial segment, and a lateral segment, because this is a thinner lobe. So we now call it the medial lobe and the lateral lobe. So we have now equal distribution. So both the right and the left lobes have got equal distributions by the division made by these hepatic veins. So what happens here? Look at this. We have another vein out here, the portal vein, which is bringing in its blood. And this portal vein, as it goes, it is giving segments to each and every, it is giving branches to each and every part of the liver, giving the anteromedial and superior branch and an inferior branch, and the posterolateral a superior branch and an inferior branch, and similarly the medial and lateral giving one branch and another branch to the lateral part. So we have now each of these lifting one segment, in which we have a number now, in which caudate lobe is called number 1. Then the lateral extreme of the liver is called number 2. As we go in a clockwise direction, we have number 3. And this is called number 4, which is actually the quadrate lobe. So above the quadrate lobe, we have the caudate lobe. So this is the quadrate lobe, which is number 4. Between 2 and 3 lies the hepatic vein. The left hepatic vein lies between 2 and 3, and this is called the left fissure. So this is the left fissure. And between the anteromedial and posterolateral, we have the right fissure, in which lies the right hepatic vein. So we have a right hepatic vein dividing the right side of the liver into 2, and the left hepatic vein dividing the liver into 2 segments. So now let's see this. So this is the left hepatic vein, dividing it into 3, 4, on the medial side of the left and 2 on the lateral side. But actually, this part is called the umbilical fissure, in which a branch of the left hepatic vein comes and separates the 3 from the 4. And the fourth segment is called the quadrate lobe. This 3 segment is the lateral part, and the most extreme part is the segment 2. And this fissure between the 2 and 3 segment is called the left portal fissure in which we have a vein, which is the left umbilical vein. A branch, the posterior branch of the left umbilical vein coming here and an anterior branch coming into this. On the right side, again, you would see that we have the liver. Now we have an anteromedial division, which has two segments out here, which is segment 5 inferiorly and segment 8 superiorly, and segment 6 and segment 7, which are on the posterior aspect. So the liver has now, if you say the caudate lobe is 1, go on a clockwise direction. So 1 is between, is actually supplied by both the right and the liver. So functionally, it is belonging to both the first and the, both right and left. So we have first segment, which is caudate. We have 2, we have 3, we have 4, and then inferior on the right side, inferomedially is 5 and superomedially is 8. So 5, inferolaterally is 6, superolaterally is 7, and superomedially is 8. It is very easy if we just remember this direction, that it is in a clockwise manner. On the left, we say 2, 3, 4, 1 for both, 5, 6, 7, 8 going for the right side. So the portal fissure is extends, that's the main division from the tip of the gallbladder to the right side of the hepatic vein. And these are the segments that has been shown out here. So I've already explained these. So the umbilical fissure actually has the main branch of the hepatic vein, and its segment 3 from 4. It's marked by the attachments on the surface by the falciform ligament, and this area is actually avascular. So it is very safe to cut the liver at this site for pediatric transplants. So the venous is the portal vein. So the blood supply to the liver is by portal vein and hepatic artery. And portal vein, we all know, is formed by the superior mesenteric and the splenic vein behind the neck of the pancreas. And I'm not going into the details of this because we are just doing the segments of the liver. And you see that there is a left side, left portal vein, a right portal vein, and they will be giving just one branch to each of the segments. Similarly, the arteries also, the right artery and the left artery, which is coming from the celiac trunk, gives rise to the hepatic artery, which divides into gastroduodenal and hepatic artery proper. So the hepatic artery proper at the hilum would give rise to a right branch and a left branch. And all these branches, when we see, because the left segment is much longer, the left artery, the left portal vein, they have a longer extrahepatic course. And if you look very carefully, you'll find that these branches are having an anterior branch and a posterior branch. And this is how it ramifies in the liver, each segment. And what a surgeon does from the surface of the liver, it's very difficult to say which segment is what. Supposing there is they want to do a liver hepatectomy at the left side of segment 2 or segment 3. So they just hold the pedicle of that artery, clamp it, immediately that area would become ischemic. The rest of the liver would look red, while this area which has been clamped would look ischemic, and with that they can come to make out which segment they have to resect. So these are showing you the hepatic veins, how they are intersegmental, while the portal veins are segmental. Going to each of the segments. The gallbladder with the bile duct. So the bile duct is bringing bile from the liver and going to the common hepatic duct, and the common hepatic duct would be opening up into this duodenum. These are just to show you the segmental distribution of how the bile duct, the hepatic artery, and the portal vein, they are all going together. They are all going together. So if one wants to remove segment 5, it's very easily just cut off the pigment, give a clamp onto this. the whole segment will lose its blood supply. It will be very easy to demarcate, and one would be able to see the section which needs to be removed. So these are the basic concepts. When you go for your clinical classes, it would be much easier. And the segmentation was actually coined by a French surgeon called Quinaud in 1954. He deciphered this, that the liver is actually arranged as segments, like we have in the lung, the bronchopulmonary segments. Here also they are segments in which the veins are intersegmented. These are corrosion casts in which different colors are being given to show you the segmentations of the liver. And this is a surface projection of the liver showing you the segments, that how the left liver has 2, 3, and 4 from the anterior surface, and 5 and 8 on the right lobe, and 6 and 7 on the right lobe. So if we go on a clockwise direction, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And 1 would be somewhere inside. Look at this, near the IVC, the caudate lobe. So we can only see it from the posterior surface, cannot see it from the anterior or superior surface. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Since it's an inverse direction, it's all clockwise. And this line that we talk about, the portal fissure, is also called the Cantley's line, which is between the fossa for the gallbladder and the inferior vena cava. So the blood flow in the liver is almost 1500 to 1900 ml per minute, 25% of the cardiac output, and it's supplied by the hepatic vein and the hepatic artery. So this is just a schematic diagram to show you the bile and blood flow. So from the liver, all the enriched, oxygen-rich blood is going by the hepatic artery, taking 20%, 80% poor in oxygen but rich in nutrient going by the hepatic portal vein to the liver, and from the hepatic veins they go into the IVC, which goes into the heart and right atrium, and the hepatic ducts are receiving the bile from the liver. The lymphatics, as we know, all organs, all structures would be having lymphatics according to the location. So here liver has 2 sets of location because it's a thick tissue, a superficial group and a deep group. So the superficial group and deep group would be in fact going to the neighboring parts, and they are intercommunicating. So they'll be going to the hepatic, pericaval, close to the IVC, paracardiac, which will be going to the posterior mediastinum, and the hepatic nodes go to the celiac node, and finally from the celiac node they'll be going into the, ultimately they all go into the cisterna chyli to the thoracic duct. And lift from the liver passes through the upper and lower nodes around the diaphragm. Obstruction to lymph cause lymph to go directly to the thoracic duct if it is not possible to go through these channels. The nerve supply is sympathetic and parasympathetic by the hepatic plexus. The sympathetic is always by the blood vessels, and the parasympathetic is by the vagus. Intercostal nerves are giving supply to the diaphragmatic surface. The liver parenchyma has very poor localization of pain. Since it's a foregut derivative, the pain is usually seen at the epigastrium. But stretch of the liver capsule can produce some well-localized somatic pain due to the intercostal nerves. So liver biopsy, I've already given you the concept of liver biopsy, that it has to be done in the place where it's not coming against the pleura or the lung. But what happens out here? Mostly nowadays, it's all ultrasound guided. And the patient, when you're doing it blindly, it has to be holding his breath in deep expiration. So the liver moves above. So now coming to the histology, I hope I have time to do a part of the histology, in which I'll just briefly say that the parenchyma of the liver is made up of hepatocytes, which are organized in cords, and these cords are separated by vascular channels, which are lined by endothelium, and they have few Kupffer cells and ito cells. The stroma is connective tissue stroma, in which the blood vessels and the bile duct traverse. And the perisinusoidal spaces are between the endothelium of the sinusoids and the epithelium, in which canaliculi for bile secretion open up. So the basic organization is that it has a central lobule vein in which the portal triads are on the corner, which has it's a hexagonal lobule, which I'll have better pictures later on, in which the portal vein, hepatic artery, and bile duct will be traversing. And the effluence of all the liver veins would be coming into the central vein and then drain. Hepatocytes, they radiate. These cells are euchromatic. They are hexagonal polyhedral in shape. And if we look at it, the human liver is not as well organized. Connective tissue stroma is much less, but pig's liver gives the typical hexagonal picture, while the human liver gives an approximation of this. So we have the central vein with, on the sides of the hexagon are the portal triad with these cord of cells going, which are the hepatocytes. And so this is a schematic diagram to show you the liver lobule, which is hexagonal in shape. This is functional. This is the anatomical lobule with the central vein, portal triads on the corners of this hexagon, and liver hepatocytes arranged as organized plates. In between them are the venous sinusoids, which are the functional liver is actually a liver acinus. This is the portal lobule, where we have the portal tract in the center and the three portal veins joining each other. This is showing how the bile is coming out. So the blood vessels which are coming from the portal vein and hepatic artery are centripetal in direction, going from the periphery to the center, while the bile is coming from the center to the periphery. So this is a portal lobule is giving you the functional lobule for bile secretion, while we have another set of lobule which is called the liver acinus, which is actually rhomboid shaped. Two portal tracts, if are joined, we have that forms the short axis of this rhomboid, and the long axis is between two central veins. So the cells which are close to the center are rich in nutrients and oxygen, as we can see here. This is a portal acinus, or a liver acinus, where the area which is the hepatocytes very close to this are called zone 1. The intermediate are called zone 3, 2, and the peripheral one close to the central vein are called zone 3. That means the ones, if there is any chance that there is a less amount of oxygen, nutrition, then the cells which get affected are the cells of the third zone. And if there is a toxic substance, then the cells which get affected are from zone 1. This is an example of a centrilobular necrosis, where there's necrosis because there's less amount of metabolism rich nutrients coming to the liver. As a result, the cells which have become ischemic are the ones in zone 3. Then would get the ones getting affected will be zone 2, and then zone 1. This is a centrilobular necrosis. In fatty liver, we find fat depositions, and finally they form cirrhotic when they become non-functional. So this is, as I have already told you, these are the classical liver lobule is hexagonal. It's the anatomical model. The portal lobule is the one triangular where the bile secretion, and acinus is the one where it is important for the blood flow and metabolism. So this is a three-dimensional picture to show you how the liver is so richly supplied by blood, by portal vein, hepatic artery, and the IVC, getting the blood out of the hepatic veins, draining into the IVC for the blood to go out. And if you look at these liver acini, these liver cells, they are the ones which are secreting actually the bile. So these bile would be coming into the bile ducts at the portal triad, finally forming the bile duct. So this is the microcirculation, which we've already done that, but the portal goes to the interlobal. This is when we do it, I think you should
Thank
be
you.
doing it clearly when we do later on. And when we look at the development, just remember that the liver develops at the 3rd week of development as hepatic buds from the foregut. So it has a ventral bud which has liver cords coming out, and they invaginate the septum transversum. So the septum transversum is the one which is the into which the liver cells invaginate the endodermal cells. And this you can already see that this is with the relation to the embryo, we have the liver forming, and we have the heart here. So the blood vessels from the vitelline and the umbilical vessels would be forming the hepatic sinusoids, and the septum transversum would be giving rise to the connective tissue stroma, Kupffer cells, and hemopoietic cells. And this, of course, shows you the liver lying in the ventral mesogastrium as it is forming. So this is the lesser omentum, and as the rotation takes place, we can see that the liver is a structure which develops in the ventral mesogastrium. There are various kind of anomalies of the liver can take place in the congenitally, and these are the different diseases by which the liver can get affected. So this gives you the summary of what an undergraduate is supposed to learn from the liver anatomy, which we've already covered almost everything. And this is that. Yes. So thank you very much, and happy Independence Day to all. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sabita. It was such a wonderful presentation from your end. Thank you so much. And as we discussed in the beginning itself, that we are going to take some Q&As, we do have actually a few Q&As for you, ma'am. So,
Yes.
ma'am, slowly, one by one, I'm going to ask you these questions. And I believe that I would say them clearly because I may not have. So, ma'am, there are questions are like, how lungs go to 6th costal margin if liver is still 5th?
How the live actually
Ma'am, yeah.
Yes, because when there is when the person is taking a deep breath during expiration, the liver is going to go ascend upwards. So as it ascends upwards, it will the lower border. What we are talking about, the lower margin can be going up into the it shrinks, so it can go up to the 6th intercostal space in the parasternal. That is just lateral to the sternal.
Okay, ma'am. Also, ma'am, there are questions that ma'am, it's a question. Could you please emphasize a little more on the peritoneal attachments of liver?
Okay, this peritoneal attachment of the liver, I have a time constraint itself is as a lecture which undergraduates find it very difficult to understand. I will take 2 hours to teach peritoneum. So here what I have done is I have only taught peritoneum in relation to the liver. So one thing I would advise all of you to understand that when we talk about peritoneum, just understand that it is a layer of peritoneum, which is a mesothelial lining, which is a double layer, which has 2 layers, a parietal layer and a visceral layer. Visceral layer is what we say is intimately related to the organ, and the parietal layer is coming from the abdominal wall and the diaphragm. So as they are coming to the liver, one layer is coming from the posterior side of the anterior abdominal wall, and it is as it is carrying the blood vessel to the liver, which is the ligamentum teres, which is actually the left umbilical vein. It is carrying a fold of peritoneum with it. So it's carrying a fold of peritoneum with it onto the anterior surface of the liver, which is called the falciform ligament. So this falciform ligament is dividing into 2, into right and left, and covering the superior surface and anterior surface of the liver. And from there, it gets reflected onto the diaphragm. And that's what I'm telling you. It's very difficult because we do peritoneum for almost 2 hours in a lecture, I have to do the sagittal disposition to tell you how from the liver it is coming to the stomach and then goes to the posterior abdominal wall. Because I was just concentrating on liver, I have not got all those pictures with me now to give it, because that is going to take a 1 hour more for me to explain everything. But it's a sensitized sense. I'm just sensitizing you all to these terms. And so that when you go back to your books and your classrooms, you would be emphasizing on certain terminologies. What is the right triangular ligament? What is the left triangular ligament? What are the coronary ligaments? What is the falciform ligament? What is lesser sac? And what is epiploic foramen, which I have not touched at all? And what do we understand by free margin of lesser omentum? All these will be taught to you. But in relation to liver, whatever was required, I have only covered that. I have not done the whole peritoneum, because that's going to take a lot of time if I want to do only peritoneum. That itself is a class.
Sure, ma'am. Ma'am, so just few more questions that, if you permit me for so. Ma'am, what are flexors actually? Flexures. What are flexors or flexors?
Flexures are turns. Flexures.
Okay.
When we say flexion of elbow, I'm making it very simple. What do? We're just bringing the two sides together. So flexure is also a bend. Hepatic flexure, splenic flexure, that we use for the large intestines.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, there's another how gallstones affects heart rhythm in heart.
That's beyond this topic, and I didn't touch all about the gallbladder. And gallbladder is also related to the. This is since they are asking, because this can cause pain because it irritates the diaphragm because of the phrenic nerve. So there can be a pain in the tip of the shoulder, which we'll be doing when we do gallbladder as an entity. But I was only concentrating on liver today.
Sure, ma'am. Ma'am, one more thing.
Few slides of development and histology.
Sure, ma'am. Yes. Ma'am, another question is how to identify the anatomical position of the liver.
Oh, that you have to, yes. How to hold it, because that every student has to hold it in their hand to see. So as I showed the pictures of the anterior surface, I'll just go to that slide if possible, if I'm still sharing my screen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So then you can just see. So when we take out the liver, because what we see in the body is the liver in situ. But in anatomy, we actually ask students to show the liver, hold it in anatomical position. So they have to hold it in such a way that the right side is on the right. This is the anterior surface. What I'm now showing my cursor. So this should be towards the front. And this vein that you see, IVC, should be right angles at perpendicular to the. It should be lying, it should be in such a way, because you see this, here it's slightly oblique. So it has to be tilted in such a way that it is almost perpendicular to the, I can show a pen out here, I'm just holding it. It should be like this. And then the anterior surface comes anterior, the superior surface comes superior, the lateral surface, right lateral on the right side, and the inferior and posterior surface would be almost continuous with each other. Because it's only that the inferior border is the one which is anteriorly and sharp, but otherwise all of them are very indistinct borders in the heart. There are no distinct borders. Right?
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, the next one is, ma'am, how pleura of lung get affected in case of hepatic abscess?
How does it get affected? Now look at this picture that you see here. This is the part which is coming directly in relation to the diaphragm. And if there's an abscess here, so the infection, and there's no peritoneum here, it can perforate. If it's a large abscess and this coronary ligament, it's not giving it much space to go below, it will just go above, because this is a very, we say it's a site which does perforate and the diaphragm out here to go into the lungs, the right lungs.
Ma'am, another one, ma'am, what is portal hypertension?
Increased pressure in the portal vein is called portal hypertension.
Ma'am, which specific part of liver is ideal for transplant?
Liver, as we already said, that it regenerates. So one segment of the liver can be taken, a hemiliver. One doesn't have to have a full liver for transplant. In fact, one can, if has live donors, a part of the liver can be also given, in which it can suffice for transplant.
Well, I think there are so many. So I think in looking into the time that we have, ma'am, today, that I would like to thank my presenter today.
These questions, and I can email them to you and you can post them back. Because what I also understand, like many students wouldn't have done abdomen yet in some of the colleges, especially our students have not done abdomen. So it's going to be slightly difficult and liver is not an easy topic. It's a slightly difficult topic. So it would be a bit difficult to understand that in a 1 hour duration, which I have tried to explain everything.
But still, I would say, ma'am, they have something to start with, even if they have not started their classes. But still, I am be the student go through the presentations. And yes, we're gonna post it on the YouTube channels also. So then they'll have a fair idea of what this label is all about. And when they attend the classes, they will learn more extensively for sure.
Yes, I think online classes are going on throughout everywhere, but depends upon which college has completed which part. Because I know very well that our college has not started abdomen yet.
Great, ma'am. Ma'am, my sincere thanks to my presenter, ma'am, to you that taking the time out and giving this presentation. I also thank my attendees of the session, which are quite a good number that we have today to attend this session. And as promised, like we are having the series of anatomy webinars. We have already conducted 4 webinars in the series, and in the coming future, our intentions are to create more such events in the future on anatomy subject itself. And we'll do this more for sure. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, attendees, for attending this seminar today. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.